The Switch 2 has been out for a bit now, and while Nintendo has had quite a few games lined up between launch and October, there's one thing missing that seems to be a clue that something big is still coming. This year so far, out of first-party titles, we have Mario Kart World, Switch 2 editions for the biggest Zelda games and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Metroid Prime 4, and Pokemon Legends ZA. The weird thing about these first-party releases is that there's no clear game lined up for the holiday season to release on Switch 2. Even Pokemon, which usually releases mid to late November, is coming out mid-October. Only Metroid Prime 4 doesn't have a solid release date as of yet, but even that's not exactly a system seller nor a thematically appropriate holiday title. That means there's a big chance we're still in the dark for whatever that big release could be, and we likely won't get confirmation until a mid to late summer direct gets produced. As for what the game could possibly be, we actually have a hefty amount of possibilities. I've narrowed it down to the most likely candidates, but of course, if I missed something or if you have different ideas on what's to come, please go ahead and write it down in the comments so we can keep the conversation going. Now, out of the first two predictions, it's hard to choose which one to talk about first, so I'm going to go ahead with the easiest option for Nintendo to start. It's now officially been half a decade since the last Animal Crossing game was released. There's no way around it. Logically, this means the next title in the series is due for announcement pretty soon here. New Horizons was kept alive for a few years thanks to its phenomenal sales, nearly 50 million to be exact. As such, we got a lot of free updates and even some paid DLC. It's safe to say the game is still pretty alive, even if most of the player base isn't logging in regularly anymore. I'm sure Nintendo's aware that the next game isn't going to sell quite as well as New Horizons, given that that game released at the absolute perfect time with the pandemic, offering us a virtual world to meet up with our friends in since we couldn't see them in person while quarantined. However, Nintendo must also realize that those 50 million sales weren't for nothing. The series has now gained exposure like never before. I'm sure a good fraction of that player base became addicted to the formula. The majority of players even look at it rather fondly now, thanks to it being a savior of sorts during our time of need. All this essentially translates to Nintendo probably having money bags in their eyes for the prospect of a new Animal Crossing game releasing for a holiday schedule. It would be a system seller for Switch 2, and a logical choice to use as an ace in this moment where the next 3D Zelda and Mario games are gonna be quite a while. Conversely, of course, this could come in the form of a Switch 2 edition of New Horizons. Maybe we'll get a second, bigger island that we can craft or something. I think this whole scenario is less likely, and would be less prone to sales or even system selling like Nintendo would probably want. But we can't deny the possibility of it simply being a Switch 2 version of Horizons, so I'm just going to toss that in here, but I do think it's more likely to be a new Animal Crossing game if that's what we get. Another game due for release is the iconic Super Smash Bros. Series. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate sold over 36 million units during its run on Switch 1. If I'm not mistaken, that's the highest selling game in the series. If one is ready anytime soon, it's a no-brainer for a holiday release. What better way to celebrate coming together than with a game that literally brings all of our favorite single-player heroes and villains together in one place to duke it out. Now, I'm sure many of you remember Sakurai's comments on the series moving forward. He made it very clear that a game like Ultimate will likely probably never happen again. The negotiations for rights is just too complicated and difficult. He stated that the alternative to this is a complete revamp to the series. Obviously, the roster would be drastically reduced for this, but the prospect of changing the gameplay formula entirely is intriguing, I'll admit. If they manage to do this, I am hoping for something more three-dimensional, and of course retaining the core essence of platforming combat. However, at the same time, I'd almost prefer that we just stick to a Switch 2 edition for Ultimate. Most of us are extremely happy with the current roster, their playstyles, and would simply just want more characters to be added in a new version with more paid DLC. The only reason I don't see this happening is because it likely wouldn't translate to a full-priced game release. We'd probably just be paying for an upgrade pack and additional DLC, which, as we know from Sakurai's own words, just isn't enough to pay the developers to continue supporting it. It's a sad reality for those of us on Team Continue Ultimate. It is the ultimate Smash Bros. Game after all, but we gotta be real. We'll likely see a revamped gameplay style and heavily reduced roster when the next Smash Bros. Announcement inevitably comes. And that time could be this holiday season, so yeah, we're keeping our eyes peeled. Before I discuss the final possibility, here's a couple of honorable mentions for what could be a holiday title. but these are unlikely due to them just not being system sellers. We know we're due for a Fire Emblem game, and we already know one has been in development for some time. This could work, but again, the series doesn't sell amazing numbers or move systems. There's also Xenoblade. It's still a relatively new series that people are catching on to, and even those of us who don't care for these games much can appreciate the scope and visual presentation they bring to the table. While the franchise still hasn't wowed with its sales, it could just be Nintendo's way of displaying the graphical potential of Switch 2. As we know, Monolith Soft is phenomenal at making visually stunning games. Alright, but let's get to the final option for what Nintendo's holiday release could be, and that's something completely new we've never seen before. This could even come in the form of a Smash Bros. Replacement or adjacent game. Maybe something akin to hero shooters like Marvel Rivals, but with Nintendo characters, or maybe a Nintendo MMO, since they're really trying to push the voice chat feature and probably want to convince us to pay for it before the free trial expires next March. Either way, this option is fairly exciting and has endless potential. Could also be a new single-player IP if not a multiplayer one. They could be wanting to use this time to expand their first-party options like they did with Splatoon a few years back, and how they choose to do so is up in the air. I'd love it if it was something to genuinely wow me, but who's to say? As for what I'd want most from all these options, I'd definitely side with something like the Nintendo MMO. I think that sounds really exciting, followed by maybe a Switch 2 edition of Smash Bros. Ultimate. Maybe throw in an actual platforming story mode within that, some new features and obviously new characters, more Echo Fighters, and an improved online experience, yada yada. Hey, maybe, if they do throw in all that, they could price it out as a basically full-priced game again. I don't know. It's just too good of a game to move on from, and I really do believe it deserves iteration rather than to be, well, moved on from. But what are you wanting or expecting from Nintendo's holiday season? Let us know down in the comments so we can discuss. Afterwards, check out more of my videos like this awesome episode of the Smash Bros. Cinematic Universe. Nintendo's been taking their time making one of their own, so I've been making one of my own for a few years now. Enjoy the web series with the link in front of you or in the pinned comment. If you'd like to have your name featured at the end of all of my videos and support me, then join my Patreon with the link in front of you or in the description, or become a channel member right here on YouTube. I've been JotoJohnny, and I'll catch you all there.